welcome to It's an Interesting Story. I'm your host, April. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. First, I have two very special guests, and also the episode is going to be a little bit longer than usual. Friday is Veterans Day, and I wanted to do a special episode in honor of that. My family is a military family. Both of my grandfathers served. My grandmother served in the Marines way back when that wasn't really an acceptable choice for women. All of my uncles served. My dad spent 27 years in the Navy. My beautiful sister retired from the Air Force a few years ago. My brother-in-law, Justin, served. As I've mentioned before, my husband also served. He retired from the Army a couple of years ago, so Veterans Day is really special to me. I have a lot of people that I'm really proud of, and there's probably a million stories that I could share. But we're going to focus in on one particular story that's really important, but not many people have heard about. As I mentioned, I've brought in some special guests, but before we get started with them and their story, I'm going to lay a little bit of groundwork for context. In 2007, the U.S. was well into the War on Terror. My husband Chris was finishing up with his second deployment with the 5th Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, the 520, also known as the Sykes Regulars. They were the very first Stryker Brigade, testing the U.S. Army's then new battle vehicle called the Stryker. They'd rolled it out for battlefield testing during their first deployment in 2003 and 2004, and it was a raging success. Everyone really loved that vehicle. Most of those men who deployed with the 520 the first time around would stay in the same unit together and deploy again in 2006 and 2007. Deployments to a war zone solidifies relationships in ways that just aren't really easily definable. Those people become your family, especially if you've done repeated deployments with them. You really grow to depend on them to get through, and they understand you in ways that other people just don't. It doesn't matter if you don't talk often. Those are the people that you immediately pick up where you left off, no matter how long it's been, and you'd do anything for them. I've heard it called trauma bonding, and that makes sense. The point is, this is your second family. So as all the guys were wrapping up their second tour, the wives were making homecoming plans, but reality was about to slap everyone in the face. A year-long deployment was finally wrapping up, and we could see the end in sight. We had less than 6 weeks to go. We could do this. Then the announcement was made that the U.S. would be conducting the surge in Iraq. That meant we were ramping up troop levels in order to try and accelerate security and stabilization in the country. Some really thoughtful person leaked to news organizations that the 520 was being extended and would remain in the country for another 3 to 4 months. That's how everyone found out that they weren't going to be coming home. I was in my living room. My husband was in the chow hall halfway around the world, but we were both having the same reaction, just disbelief, anger, confusion. Emails quickly went out to the families to try and explain, and the men were gathered to let them know that they were, in fact, not going to be going home anytime soon. Things just went from bad to worse. I didn't know it at the time, but they'd been tasked with spearheading the campaign for Baqubah. The mission, in a nutshell, was to make their way into Baqubah and push out Al-Qaeda. Baqubah had been overtaken, and Al-Qaeda had proclaimed it as their Islamic State capital. In the early days of the war, Al-Qaeda hadn't been a very organized force. They'd kind of just pop off a few shots or mortars and then take off. It wasn't conventional warfare or an organized movement, but that was changing. It was time to cut the head off the snake, so to speak. Al-Qaeda had seen how the U.S. and other armies had employed tactics that made them deadlier and more successful in their objectives, and someone was apparently taking notes, so Al-Qaeda had begun training their own members, mimicking what they'd seen from foreign troops over the past few years. It had been a really unwelcome surprise, so the 520 would be leading the charge to push them out and disband them so that Baqubah could be handed back over to the people in the area. At one point in the mission, the families back home were sent an email notifying us that there would be a total blackout on communication, meaning that we wouldn't be hearing from them in any way for however long. No one was exactly sure, but they estimated it would probably be about a month. The unit was going to be going out to an undisclosed location for a mission. The email went on to explain the usual reminders of operational security, blah, blah, blah. But one line stood out because it mentioned that they expected high casualties. My stomach dropped. I stared at that line for a minute and then smacked the delete button because it felt like bad luck just reading that. Of course, I know that's ridiculous, but your mind does really funny things sometimes. It's kind of the same thing. When they first leave, you don't want to move their things. It took me months to put my husband's shoes away because it felt like if I did, then he really was gone. He wouldn't be there to leave them out for me to trip over again for at least a year. I knew I wouldn't be hearing his voice, so soothing those anxieties wouldn't come anytime soon. We just had to wait it out. If we made it till 11 p.m., then that meant he was safe. No one comes to the door after 11 p.m., so you could breathe, at least for a little while, until 6 a.m. when they started notifications again. And then you just had to get to 11 p.m. again before you knew that they were safely through another day. It was a cycle that played out every day while you waited to hear from them and tried your best to keep things normal for your kids. Every car that slowed down or unexpected knock on the door just made you hold your breath. For their part, on the other side of the world, things were intense from day one. It was some of the worst fighting in Iraq. There weren't any reporters around, though. Only one had gone out with them because it was just too dangerous. That reporter was killed when a striker that he was in was hit by an IED, so that was that. The stories just weren't going to be told. In the Upper Army, just about everybody knows about the fight for Baqubah. It was a defining mission. It changed a lot of things for the Army, and there are still lessons that were learned from that battle that are taught to soldiers today. But those who lived through it, their stories haven't really been heard. I wanted to give them a chance to share just a small snippet of their experience. So I asked my husband and our friend John to share with us. For time's sake, this is a really condensed snapshot of everything that they did. The stories they could share could last for hours. Chris and John weren't just fellow soldiers, they were roommates while they were in Iraq and also best friends. People used to jokingly refer to them as the old married couple. They loved each other like brothers, but they bickered like an old married couple does. Apparently, John doesn't appreciate Chris's inability to hurry the hell up. As his actual wife, I can honestly sympathize. John's voice is going to be a little bit quieter than Chris's because he was joining us from a different state, but hopefully the recording is clear enough that you're able to hear everything. I don't talk much during their time. I really wanted them to be able to share their story the way they wanted to. So this is what they had to say about some of their time spent in Baqubah in their own words. With that said, please keep in mind that they will be talking about their experiences in a war zone, and while they won't be getting graphic, it may still be hard for some people to hear, so please just be warned about that before going further. Here is Chris and John.
My name's Chris. I was a squad leader in 1st Platoon, Alpha Company 520.
Hi, and I'm John. I was also squad leader with Chris in Alpha Company 520.
So today we're here with April to talk about our time at Baqubah in 2007. Our unit was currently stationed in Baghdad at the time, and then we got orders to go help out 112 Cav in Baqubah. We reported there March 10th. Our whole time there was only 5 months and 9 days. It felt much, much longer. But starting off, we didn't really have a whole lot of information going in. We didn't really understand why we were going there until our first day outside the wire doing a ride-along with, I think it was a lieutenant from 112 Cav, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, I know that the different companies essentially split up and went to different parts of the city. We were following her and the strikers with were they in Bradleys or were they in tanks?
They were both. They had a mix of Bradleys and tanks.
Yeah, and essentially I know that we went out and we were just doing reconnaissance of the city, going through just to try to get an overview, figure out where things were, have them talk us through some of their previous experience and everyththing.
Yeah, I think we went over to a peaceful area to talk to a sheik first. That was heavily protected by the Iraqi police.
Yeah, I think that was up a little bit north of New Baqubah.
Right, by the market, just up north of the marketplace, I believe.
Yeah, up north of the marketplace. And it turns out we spent a lot of time there, in the future, just because it's a little bit quieter, I feel like. But yeah, we went up there to try to get a gauge, meet some of the local law enforcement, figure out what they were doing and what they needed help with before we moved deeper into the city.
Right, and as our time sitting there trying to figure out, it felt like Baghdad and Mosul, really. It was just normal, talking to police, sitting around trying to figure out why we're here. And then we get the call over the radio on the far side of town. So Baqubah is a pretty big area. There's different neighborhoods. There's Katoon to the west, and then there was, on the east side, there was the marketplace. Just south of the marketplace was Tahrir, and just south of Tahrir was Baritz. So we get a radio call, saying that there was a IED strike on 1st Platoon Bravo Company. It was a catastrophic kill, which I think that was the first part of our tour that we ever heard that come over the radio.
So explain what that is.
So catastrophic kill is IED strikes the vehicle, and that vehicle is no longer operational. That vehicle is out. We've had IED strikers hit with car bombs, smaller IEDs, some other stuff, and just continue driving, or at least get pulled out of the area. Yeah, this striker was not going anywhere. So strikers have 4 wheels on each side, so a total of 8. And I believe when we got over there, it was missing the first 4 front tires were gone, and it was on its side. But
yeah, I remember like when we got called and went over there and everything, we essentially like drove straight through like the kill zone and everything where it was, in order to get to like the other side where it kind of set up like a perimeter security while they were attempting to recover the vehicle. And yeah, I remember seeing the striker on its side and everything, and it was just so far kind of gone to what we've experienced with anything the beginning of the tour. You could definitely tell that they were using kind of different tactics.
yeah, I think a big wake up call. So our PL's truck, Lieutenant was in front, then my truck, then your truck, and then the last truck was our platoon sergeant's truck. So a total of 4 strikers. And just the drive down, because we had to cross a bridge, we had to drive through the marketplace and then head west, go over the bridge to Katoon. And just the drive through the main part of town was a huge eye opener because there was craters, like huge IED craters everywhere. And I remember, I think it was what was that route? Gold and Marketplace? Like every building was riddled with tank rounds, which we'd never seen before, and ammunition or bullets, like 50 cal ammo and 7.62, just riddled the bullets the whole way down. We were like, what? Where have we arrived to? Like, what is going on?
Yeah, I remember the main MSRs and everything as we went down them, just because absolutely nobody was on the street but us.
Yes.
Like nobody sitting out on the side of the road, no cars. You saw no civilian population whatsoever. Like that entire day, I felt like. But yeah, going down the streets, it was one of those like you would just picture it in movies, to where it's just every window was broken, every building had numerous bullet holes in it. But that was on the MSRs, like the 2 main MSRs and everything going through. Like all it was, it looked like just demolished buildings.
So explain why it was eerie for there not to be any civilian population, and also why you guys were going into Baqubah to begin with.
So not seeing anybody on the streets was a huge indicator that bad guys were in the area and stuff was about to happen. Because sometimes they would notify the local populace that they were about to do an attack, and sometimes the local populace just knew they were about to do an attack. They didn't get any notification, but they knew it was about to happen, so they would vanish. We got called over there, that we found out later on, after the first day there. The Islamic State capital, or Al-Qaeda, announced that Baqubah was their state capital, just like they did up at Mosul later on, after the war ended, and then over in Syria, they established their Islamic State capital. So they first did it in Baqubah. They just took over the whole entire town. I believe down bridge, they slaughtered a whole police station and took the whole station over. So there was a lot of bad guys in town. So
yeah, I think it was one, like it kind of started with the surge, like in Iraq, like other units and everything got extended, like right when we arrived, like the first part of the country, and they did the surge and really pushed down to Baghdad to try to secure Baghdad.
Yep.
I think that really like pushed a lot of the bad guys out of the area, and Baqubah is what they decided to call their capital and become their home. So with that, they moved into there, and without a heavy U.S. military presence, they essentially were able to kind of fortify and secure the entire area for months. So this was essentially like the beginning of the Islamic State. So ISIS, I mean, if you think about it, this is like how they really like stood up and started getting a foothold in Iraq, and then eventually moved to Syria.
Yeah, and the American unit there, God bless those guys. When we got there, we found out later that they were pretty much combat ineffective. They were getting tanks blown up, Bradleys blown up. It was 1 battalion of tanks and Bradleys out of Fort Hood. And after a while, they had so many wounded and killed, they were only leaving the wire with like maybe, I think a tank holds 5, and they were going out with like 3 people in a tank.
Yeah.
Bradley holds like 7. They were going out with like 3 or 4 people in a Bradley because that's all they could, get into the vehicles. It was crazy. So
yeah, they got pretty messed up and everything, which is why I think they kind of like requested the support. And that's where kind of like the intelligence portion kind of failed, I think, with us. Because they requested support to come down and help clear some palm groves, because they thought that's where a lot of like the enemy was keeping weapons, and different weapons caches were kind of stored, and they really wanted help to clear the palm groves out just to try to alleviate some of like the capabilities of the insurgents there in town. So we were up there, and I think I think, Chris, they told us 3 weeks. We'd be up there for 3 weeks.
Yes.
In Palm Groves.
Yeah, roughly like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How long did it actually end up being?
Over 5 months.
Yeah,
of like intense. So we got there March 10th as we landed. March 11th we went out. And like I said, we were driving around checking everything's out, and that's when we got the call the striker was catastrophically killed from Bravo Company. So when we get over there, I remember there was tracer rounds flying everywhere. It was, bullets that you can see. And there was a low-flying fighter jet that did a show of force where they fly really low on top of the rooftops, and it shatters windows and it's super loud to kind of scare the bad guys back. And our platoon of 4 strikers roll through the little tight-knit neighborhood at the time. Then it opens up to like older houses, like, more brick houses, one-story houses, dirt roads. There was no pavement anywhere in Katoon. It was all dirt, which made sense for why we found out later that's where Al-Qaeda stuck their leadership, because it was heavy fortified. And we found out the hard way that first day rolling over there. Nobody told us that was their headquarters. So we roll up, we come out of the newer neighborhood, and we go into the older neighborhood, and we look over to the right, and there's Bravo Company striker up on its side. There's a couple Bradleys sitting there. Our lieutenant, who was the first truck, the lead truck, goes, "Hey, we're going to push out, get more security." So, okay, so we continue going straight forward, and we're on a dirt road, and I remember there were some small buildings off to our right, a small open field to the left, and I looked at my gunner, and I looked at him, and I was like, this is a bad area. This is an ambush site. This is a kill zone, because of the soft road we were on. The small buildings everywhere is open, and then I didn't even get a chance to finish that sentence when a deep buried struck our lieutenant's truck. Thank God it struck it on the front right side, so it just missed the driver. The blast literally put a hole all the way through the striker from top to bottom, and it lifted the striker off the ground. I'll never forget that image, an entire striker going about 2 feet off the ground and coming back down.
Yeah, being back behind you, I had a decent view of it as well. But it literally took the entire engine out of the striker. And if anyone just Google striker and looks at it, the engine's in the front right, that engine is about the size of a Volkswagen. And it essentially took it and completely pushed it out of the striker, blew out the armor, and flipped it upside down. Just the engine itself, inside the actual hull of the striker.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was Bravo Company First Sergeant came around the corner, probably about maybe 20 minutes later. Me and my squad dismounted. The striker rolled forward a little bit. The lieutenant striker rolled forward a little bit after getting hit. We ran over. We're trying to call him on the radio. Nobody's answering. We had to dismount real quick. I'm trying to get security. There was like a little tiny shack, like a little cigar shack. It was small. And that's the only place that me and my squad can hide behind. And we're popping, smoke grenades left and right trying to cover us because we're dead open. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like a horrible area right now. Like one AK could take a whole squad out. And I look over the hole, and there's a piece of slant armor that was in the hole. That's how big the hole was. A piece of slant armor came off the striker and went into the hole. It's a slant armor. It's like a big cage that keeps us protected from RPGs. And we finally got some people to pop their heads out of the back and try to give us assessment. We kind of climbed up in there and tried to check on everybody. And I remember the gunner was pinned. He just sat down to adjust his gun, his 50 cal, because there's a remote control down below with a screen, and he was adjusting it, and he just stood back up on top of his chair to look outside out of the hatch so he could see around, and that's when the IED hit. So the floorboard came up and pinned his leg to the back of the chair. If he was still sitting, it probably would have gutted him.
Yeah.
It would have killed him.
Yeah, I think that if he wouldn't have stood back up when he did,
yeah,
I think that we probably would have lost him.
Yeah.
And everything for that.
And our poor lieutenant, if it wasn't for our camouflage netting we had rigged on top of our striker to help us, keep snipers from shooting us, we're sitting out of the hatches. If it was for that netting up there, he would have been blown out of the striker, because he came up, hit the netting, and landed on top of the striker. And he cracked his chin, or they had a huge bruise on one of his thighs.
Well, he was completely out. I mean,
he was out.
It was one of those, him and are the lucky ones, because it essentially struck right in between them.
Yes.
But with that, I mean, he's just lucky that it hit where it did. Otherwise, it could have been a lot worse, and it could have ended up like 3rd Platoon did eventually, a couple months later.
Yes. So we found out later that the original striker that hit from 1st Platoon Bravo Company, their driver did pass. They lost a driver, and the entire squad was not returned to duty. They all had to get evac'd. I don't think any of them came back to theater after that. So the first day of riding around trying to learn this new town, this new battleground that we're at, trying to figure everything out, we ended up with 2 strikers down out of the whole battalion. First day, we lost 2 strikers. We had 14 wounded and 1 KIA on the very first day. And I believe that was
probably before lunch, I think.
That was what? Yeah, before lunch. Yeah.
Yeah, before lunch.
And that since that day, we never could keep 4 strikers. Every time we would get a 4th striker, it'd get hit with something and we'd lose it and we'd go back down to 3. So the whole time we could never get back up to 4 strikers. We rolled the 3 strikers pretty much the rest of the time there.
Yeah, like we kind of said before, I think that first day really like set the tone for the rest of the battle. Right, because we came from Mosul to where we had some small skirmishes, smaller IEDs, went to Baghdad to where we're on larger clearing missions and everything. But I felt like those weren't horrible. I mean,
No.
yeah, like we had people get wounded and some people KIA and everything, but I mean, it was very spread out and it wasn't as, I guess, like compacted with the engagements. Like, because we went out on that first day and we were in a firefight for, I feel like, 3 months.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those that every time you went outside the wire, it was just constant. And it wasn't if you were going to get engaged, but when, what direction, and who was going to get hit first. Like, I remember talking with, like, guys in my truck and everything, and it's like, all right, coin flip, who's getting it today? I mean, 50-50 shot essentially each time we rolled out the wire.
Oh, me and my gunner and our driver at the time, depending what driver I had that day, we would talk to each other on our internal communication of this truck. And every time we had to go down a road, and I'd call up, be like, does anybody know when this road last got cleared? And nobody can give me an answer. So we would just look at each other and plug our ears, wait for the detonation. It was like we were preparing, but it was kind of like a joke. We were just like, okay, get prepared to blow up today because we don't know what's going to happen.
Big mechanism.
Yeah, it was coping mechanism. It was stupid, but hey, got you through your day.
Yeah.
But I mean, after that first day, and is like the month of April, we only saw the fob for 2 days.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah,
we
absolutely.
lived out in town. We would literally just find an empty house, or we'd ask a family, hey, we lived in the town for the whole month of April, and we went back to the fob to regroup and refit real quick for 2 days out of the whole month.
Yeah, it was mainly the trucks. Like, essentially, like when they got low on fuel, we would bed down and hold up somewhere. And I can't remember if another platoon would kind of like push strikers over to our area to kind of cover down.
Right.
But, I mean, it would just be like they would go back, like restock on chow and fuel, then come directly back out.
Yes. And it was just crazy. Then we started, getting to more like, okay, we can't be just, one platoon in one neighborhood. And some neighborhoods we completely didn't go into right away because it was so dangerous. Like Tahrir was heavily fortified with the IEDs. And there was a few hundred fighters that made that their home. Like they would not leave. Like they weren't going to run away. And I think that was our first really major offensive was Tahrir, I believe, the first clearance.
Well, Buritz.
I'm sorry, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, so we tried to, I think like leadership wanted to try to fulfill like the main mission that we were there for, to clear the palm groves. Right? So it's like we saw the town, we were in firefights, we really couldn't do any type of like true reconnaissance and figure out like different areas to go and everything. So they said, okay, let's go clear the palm groves. And this was one where I think it was 114, like the cab guys, they were up front and they were just getting demolished by IEDs left and right. Like they couldn't make it down the road.
There was one road down there. One. Yeah. That's how narrow it was.
But I remember like we were just like stuck in the truck for hours and couldn't move. I think like we had to get out, push like overwatches to like buildings and stuff like that just to try to get like better visibility. But eventually it came down to where it's like, okay, the trucks aren't going to make it and we just have to go on foot. And that's how we initially got to the palm groves.
Yeah.
I know you remember that day.
Oh, yeah, I do. And I remember the main reason we got pushed down to the Buritz first is because there was another terrorist organization fighting us alongside Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
It was 1920 Brigade, I believe. They started fighting Al-Qaeda. For like 2 weeks, they started fighting each other because Al-Qaeda was too extreme. They came up to us, a known group that was fighting us for 2 years came to us saying, hey, we're not getting on with these guys anymore. Give us some ammo. We'll go fight them. And instead, we turned them into scouts. Like, hey, point out where all the Al-Qaeda guys are, where the houses are and stuff, and we'll go take care of them. And that was a big turning point for us. That helped a lot. But
it was. I remember giving them all PT belts, and you just see a bunch of people standing in the middle of the room with PT belts.
Well, brown army shirts and PT belts. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Palm Grove. Oh my gosh. Yeah, because we didn't have first squad wasn't fully back yet. I don't think.
No, it was literally like 2 of them, and I think they were kind of just like on point.
Yeah, they were kind of floating with your guys. I think floating with your squad for a little bit. You guys were on point. I remember in the Palm Grove. You guys went to that little crack in the wall first.
Yeah, so like with the palm groves, I mean, it's probably good to explain. Like it was literally like ran across the river. I don't know, a couple miles of just woods.
It was
like
it was big. Yeah,
the city. It was pretty big. But what we didn't know and what nobody ever told us or intelligence didn't tell us was that these were essentially like people's farmlands.
Yep.
Right. So they had fences around everything. So it was almost impossible to move through. I think you could move like 25, 50 meters and you came across a barbed wire fence that essentially you had to breach.
Yep.
And this was through miles of woods and palm groves. So that really became an issue when they started engaging us. Yeah, I remember being up front and we were just trying to make it down to our objective rally point, our ORP, just so we could get to our place, wait for the rest of the company to get set up, and then we'd start our sweep and everything of the palm groves and start clearing it out. And we couldn't even make it there. We ran into a brick wall this thing was probably, 10 feet tall?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was just in the middle of the woods. It was a 10-foot tall cinder block wall that went as far as I could see to the left and as far as I could see to the right.
We weren't even really deep into the palm grove yet. We were 40, 50 yards just outside the neighborhood into the palm groves? Yeah. We're barely into the woods yet.
Yeah. I remember going up to, be like, hey, what are we going to do about this? He's like, there's nothing, there's not a door or anything. How are we getting through? And I was essentially moving back to, I don't know, was certain acting platoon leader at the time.
Yeah.
So I guess trying to figure out what he wanted to do. And that's when essentially we were engaged in a small ambush.
Yeah, after that whole fight, we didn't have a lieutenant because he was still recovering from the first day of being blown up. Yeah, I remember I got up to where, did you guys make that hole in the wall?
I think we found it eventually. It was down a little bit, but we had to backtrack to get to it.
Right.
But yeah, so, I mean, you were on one side of a wall. We were essentially I was in a little 50 meter square of property. You were in a different 50 meter square property.
Yes.
And I remember the whole squad was really bunched up on each other. And there wasn't many places to go. I want to say in the ambush, there was at least 4 or 5 different insurgents that were part of it shooting at us just because the rate of fire.
Oh, the amount of fire. Yeah.
How spread it was.
Oh, yeah.
And it was more than just AKs. I think it's belt-fed weapons as well. Just the trees started exploding around us.
Yeah, when he says trees, he means 5, 6 inch thick trees, not big trees you can hide behind. These were tiny little trees.
I think there was essentially 2 trees that could hold somebody behind it. And I remember stacking with 3 or 4 people behind it, and everyone was just stacked on each other just to try to get some type of cover from that. But I mean, we laid down returning fire and everything, but there was nothing that we could do. I mean, instead of being Marines and running straight into the fire, it's okay, I tried to get a hold of you to see if you could flank. And from that point, I think that you were just kind of pinned down because of all the fencing, and you couldn't do anything from your end.
I couldn't move because, like you said, I was in a separate box just to your right on the other side. I couldn't run forward because there was another big wall of fence with shrubs and stuff growing through it, so you couldn't see through it. I leaned through the hole and I emptied a mag out that direction where the fire was coming from. I emptied an entire mag out. It was funny because I remember our medic, Doc, just went through the wall just seconds before the initial contact. I emptied a mag. I'm changing a mag out. All of a sudden, I see this little head pop up. It was Doc. He's like, "Can I please come back over to your side?" I was like, "Yes, hurry up." And I threw him back over the wall. I started returning fire. My saw gunner, he runs over, and he's a little short, so he's trying to step on some stuff or whatever he can find to look over the wall so he can start shooting. And I'm yelling at him. I'm like, "Hey, this direction, third squad's right here. You need to aim that direction." He goes, "Okay." And then one of my other riflemen, who was 6'7", you remember who that guy was?
Yeah.
He runs over just in front of on the wall, and he can see over the wall because he's tall as shit. So he pops his head, and just as he pops his head open to kind of get where he needs to aim at, a couple rounds hit the wall right in front of his face. So he goes down, sees that, my saw gunner, freaks out, and so he puts his saw over the wall and just starts spraying, not looking, and it was hilarious, but it was I'm yelling at the same time. I'm like, "Please, you need to aim your weapon next time." And he was like, "Sorry," but I'm like, "You know what? I love your fight. I like that." He made a big loud noise. That's one of the good things you can do during an ambush. So
yeah.
Thinking back, we were in near ambush, dismounted a few times. We were ambushed on a road and on the ground, which not too many people can say. It was just nuts. And it took a few minutes to repel the bad guys so they stopped shooting, and you guys could start moving and getting up and start breathing again.
Yeah, and I remember just kind of clearing the objective and everything afterwards. I feel like we didn't even do that very well just because there was a fence. We reached that fence and went through, and there was a road on the other side.
Yeah.
And then there was nothing. And at that point, I think the commander came and was like, "Hey, move to the ORP."
Right.
So at that point, it's okay, well, I guess this is just done. So we're just gonna pick up and keep moving.
Well, it was so crazy because he's still in the Army right now. I think he's Sergeant Major now. He was a squad leader in Sec Platoon. They were right behind us. the company commander told them to go around, like go back into the town and go around us while we're pinned down fighting off this near ambush, so we can keep the company moving. So he told me later they circled back around us to keep moving, take the lead ahead of us while we were dealing with the firefight. And he gets so far ahead, and I remember the EOD guys were running out of robots. They had 3 robots, and 2 of them were damaged because the bad guys shot them and broke them, and they're looking for bombs. And they're like, we need help. We're down to the last robot, so the little IED finder, and pulls up further up the road a little bit with a squad, and he hears something, and he tells the guys, hey, stay back. And he sneaks to the edge of the house, a building that he was at, pops his head around the corner, and there's a robot shaking a bag like a few feet from him. He was like, oh crap, and he had to run back real quick. He's like, get back. And I was like, that's, of course that happened. I totally believe you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, this is probably about the time where I realized that not command across the entire battalion, but maybe specifically more within our company was inexperienced. Just because, like, when we were engaged there, like, we should have followed through and did, like, sweeping of at least, like, the immediate area after that, just to see if there was anything there, instead of moving to the ORP. I mean, it's react to contact, right? And, like, you want to take the fight to the enemy, and when they attack you, you should be decisive about that, and actually, like, move through, instead of like, okay, we're done here, let's just go and, like, consolidate up here.
Yeah,
like, we were just in close quarters combat, like Vietnam era style, like near ambush. We need to kind of continue with this, right? And it shouldn't be like, well, let's move the other platoon so we can go up here and make our, like, kickoff spot and everything for the clearing mission. Like, that just changed, right? But unfortunately, I feel like our command didn't realize that.
I think
spawned into a lot of, like, bad decisions moving forward.
Yeah, I think it was a huge,
specifically within our company.
Yeah, it was a huge lesson. I think it was a lot of people we haven't really came across that level of fighting, that level of determination with the enemy. They're not afraid of us. They're not, as soon as they see us, not going to run away. As soon as we shoot at them, they're not going to run away. They're actually going to flank and come back at you in a different angle on a different side. Like, they're not going to run away. Like, up until that point, like in Baghdad, Mosul, even in my first deployment there, you fire a couple shots at them, they were gone. And this time in Baqubah, they knew they had the numbers and they had the training, they had the support, they had weapons out the wazoo, so they were not backing down. Like, they were going to hold their ground no matter what. And I think that was a huge lesson for us, and just on the ground, even for our company and battalion, that they're like, hey, these guys aren't running, like, they're staying and fighting, and they know what they're doing. Like, they're competent, which is a bad thing to say, but it was true. It was almost like fighting another American squad sometimes, in training, doing playing Op 4. Like, they're not backing off. They're gonna do the same thing you're doing. They're gonna stay and fight. They're gonna flank. They're gonna move. They're gonna communicate. And these guys were doing the same thing, which really was bad for us. I mean, it made it so much rough because we're on their turf. We didn't really have a whole lot of combat fighters on the ground either initially. Like, the number of
limited
fighters they had compared to what we had the technology, but they had the numbers. So when we had to get off our trucks and go fight street to street, door to door, tree to tree, so it was a huge lesson learned there.
Yeah, but we also had zero intelligence about what we were going up against. And
that's true. Yeah.
They knew what was coming their way. Do you remember them dropping pamphlets before we went?
Oh, well, yeah, our side did.
Yeah.
Our side did, trying to scare them.
Yeah, they dropped pamphlets before we actually made it into Baqubah, like, before we actually, like, left Baghdad, saying that, and I forget the wording on it, but, like, hey, like, we're coming, like, we attack by night or something like that, you should fear us. That did not work.
No, that totally benefited them, I believe, in the long, after the fact. It was just like, wow, so you just gave them a heads up that another American force was coming in? Like, why would you? Everybody thought that too. Everybody, like, after the first week there. Coming? Yeah, as soon as we found that out, everybody was like, so is this why we got lit up the first day? And, like, they were just, okay, so let's prepare, That initial push into the Barretts was insane. I mean, we were able to clear it out, which was great, but then everybody else in Baqubah was like, hey, great, come to my neighborhood and do that. And so it just kind of, there's a domino effect.
Barretts was the first time we're like, hey, look, we have it cleared. Maybe we should leave somebody here.
Exactly.
And with 114, since they were kind of like leading the charge and they had everyone there anyway, it was one I think they just kind of like held in place, so they could kind of keep overwatch and maintain at least some type of military presence in that area. I think that spawned kind of what we ended up doing throughout the rest of the city from that point.
I heard the whole clear hole build, actually, when we did it, like, we were the first unit in country to actually go in, fight, street to street, and push the opposing force out, and then hold it, and then start building it. Everybody saw that across the country. It was like, hey, that works. You need to find a unit that's crazy enough to go in there and clear them out, but it works. And then I think the next one was Trier then, correct?
Yeah, I think Trier was after that. And I feel like that was a lot better planned than Blitz, just because we knew exactly what we would end up facing more than likely. I think like the intelligence improved a little bit, but it was one, like there's a little bit more planning instead of like, okay, let's go clear palm groves now.
Yeah, it was more organized. We definitely had better assets. We had, Apaches on station, a lot. Apaches were almost always on station, which was great because we used them. We got really good with using Apaches. So, yes. I mean, like bad guys they would shoot at us. We know exactly where they're at. We would return fire and then call the Apaches in real quick. The Apaches would blow up that location with, Hellfires or whatever else we had on station. And then we keep moving. It started working really good. But Trier was 7 days, I think we took to clear that.
I can't remember.
I want to say it was...
Honestly, it blends together. Day one sticks with me of clearing Trier. Other than that, I don't really remember too much of it.
So I can't remember. Was it me in the intersection getting lit up, or was it you almost getting your head blown off walking to a doorway? Which one was first?
So, I was actually, before, this, I was, looking at a map, and I actually found, a portion of the map where I think we were, because I remember there was a field that was kind of right up next to us, and we were on this little kind of, bendy road that kind of, went around and just kind of, paralleled a little bit the open area.
Right.
But I remember we were up there clearing, and we were, the northern portion of the clearing effort on Trier.
Right.
So there wasn't anybody past that field that was friendly forces, right? We were, the northern boundary. We were going through basic clearing, and it's just hey, go in, clear. All right, check the other house. The gate opens this way. All right, security's up. Either I think we were bounding by squads.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were flip flopping.
Yep.
So I would clear one, you'd go ahead, clear the other one, and I would flip flop. And I remember we went in, we were clearing the house, and I was looking for the next gate, and I couldn't see it. There was just a bend in the road, and I couldn't see it. So I kept edging out and edging out and edging out. And I edged out too far without security. And that's when I don't think I ever saw the person, but the Iraqi army guy, I think we called him Rambo.
Yeah.
He was with us, and he was standing in the middle of the road, and he just came running towards me. But at that point, that's essentially where my alive day, I guess. But I mean, I don't know how I wasn't hit. There was probably 50 rounds that was shot that impacted the wall behind me, went around me. It was like the cartoon, how you outline the body with bullets.
Right.
Yeah. But essentially that was me, and he saved me. He literally ran into me and pushed me back into the house. At that point, I think either you came up or my squad started firing outside the fence, but I thought I was hit just because I think I landed on his AK stabbed me in the leg. So I thought I got shot there, but I wasn't, luckily. But from that point, we were essentially engaged for the rest of the day, and that's when we stopped moving on the streets and we started blowing holes in walls in order to kind of move throughout.
And back
actual,
behind the houses, little jumping little walls behind the houses, little alleyways, but I remember the intersection. You apologized so many times for this, and I was like, it wasn't your fault. But you remember you were like, I can't see the gate, but we talked to the old man that owns the house. He was on a corner house at an intersection, so the last house on the street. I don't know, you guys didn't have a translator, but somehow you guys, through hand puppets and stuff, you got him to go, hey, go open your front gate, go unlock it for us.
Yes. Yeah.
And so he was like, okay. And I remember you called me, you were like, hey, the old man's about to go unlock his gate for you. And I was like, cool. So we determined you're going to run across the street with a battle buddy. So the whole squad's not running across the street together, but it's going to be by twos. So the whole, squad doesn't get shot up. But if the two guys make it across the street, at least not by yourself, you have a buddy with you. The first two guys run up, get in. My other two guys are right in front of me. I'm about maybe 10, 15 feet behind them, and I'm running by myself. And it was a team leader and a soldier, and they run in, and just as they're turning to go into the gate, that's when the rounds started coming from down the street and going through the gate as my guys are running through it. And immediately I see this. I can't return fire because there's a building. The way the angle was, I didn't have a shot. I didn't have a shot down the street. And that's when I started taking shots coming directly at me from across that big open field. Till this day, I still remember the rounds. They weren't tracer rounds. They were just regular bullets. But I remember them shiny in the sunlight, flying past my head. And I remember I was like, I'm not going to make it through that gate. Because I'm imagining my guys on their side, oh man, one of my guys probably hit, or maybe both of them are hit. Because there was a lot of rounds going through the gate as they were running through it. So I had no choice. I had to turn around. I tried to run back to your guys' house where your guys are out, the last house. And I remember as I took a couple steps, I could still hear the bullets flying past me. And I was like, I'm about to take one, in my butt, in the back of my leg, somewhere. I'm going to take one in my back somewhere. And I remember initially I just let go of my rifle because it was slung. And I just went down to all four and I started bear crawling as fast as possible. And I remember I looked up, there was a little miniature bus, almost like a Volkswagen bus kind of thing, parked next to your guys' gate. And I remember the rounds were hitting the vehicle as I'm crawling up to your gate. And I think it was grabbed me and pulled me into the courtyard. And I rolled over to my back like a turtle. And I'm laying there catching my breath. And like, are you hit? And I go, I don't know. Am I? And I think most of your squad came over, ran over, stood around me. And I'm just sitting there looking at you guys like, I don't know. Am I hit? I have no idea. And I think half your squad started patting me down.
Yeah,
and you're like,
yeah, I think we were laughing at you at that point.
Yeah, you were laughing at me. And then I remember you were like, you're fine. Get up. I was like, thanks.
But no, I mean, they engaged us from pretty far away, fairly accurately. Because that field, I mean, it was, 200 meters?
Oh,
I think.
I probably
maybe a little.
I'd say further than that, maybe. But it was a big foot. But they were pretty good. But I remember I yelled over to my guys, one of my team leaders, over the wall from your courtyard to their courtyard where they were pinned down in, because we were still taking fire down the street. Mm-hmm. And I yelled at them. I was like, "Is anybody hit?" And my alpha team leader, he was like, "No, none of our guys are hit. But the old man who opened the gate, he's been shot." And I was like, "Oh crap!" I'm like, "Okay." So I remember I called Seven, our platoon sergeant, who had the medic with him. I was like, "Hey, you guys have to go to the back alleyways. Don't run up the street." And they were like, "Okay." So I linked up with our medic in the back alleyway. We're knocking over walls and jumping over walls. Like the alley was maybe like 6 foot wide. It wasn't very wide at all. And we got into the back door of the house where my squad was at. And the poor old man, he got one of his fingers shot off, and he got a really bad gunshot wound to his thigh. Our doc tried everything he could to save him. I mean, we tried to stick stickers on their cars to let them drive to the hospital to leave the area. But his family, he had like 3 or 4 sons, adult sons there. And all of them were like, "We can't leave." And we're like, "What do you mean you can't leave? Your dad's going to die right here. You need to take him to the hospital. Like, we can only do so much." And they're like, "You don't understand. There's a massive IED right there in the intersection outside our house." I was like, "Are you serious?" And they were like, "Yes. Like, if we drive out there right now, they might detonate it." They were terrified to leave their house with their car. Basically, I ran through an intersection and got shot at with a deep buried there too. So that was a great day.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the rest of Trier. It was essentially a firefight the entire way through it. Like you said, that's when we started using Apaches, and like once we were able to identify them, and this even happened across that field. Once we could identify their building, essentially like called Apaches, and they were able to fire and take down that building. But we did that a lot. I don't think we started doing it at that clearing mission. It may have been like Katoon, like another month or so down the road. But we started using the more accurate, was it MLRS rockets to actually take out buildings?
Yes,
and, intersections.
I think they called them Gimblers.
Yeah.
If I remember right. Yeah, that was during Arrowhead Ripper. So we got there March 10th, and I believe it was June 18th is when the rest of another battalion from our brigade showed up with our brigade headquarters, because they saw how bad it was there. And we were like, "Hey, we could really use another striker battalion here, please." So they showed up to assist us during that fight for Katoon, which, like I said before, we found out later was the Al-Qaeda headquarters.
And that was the first Arrowhead Ripper, right?
Yes. But yeah, those rockets were awesome. I freaking love those things.
Yeah. Yeah, luckily they do a lot of damage to a little space.
Yeah, we remember.
If it was a larger space, it would have been a different story today, I think.
Yeah, remember the house that got hit across the street from us?
It was right next door to us.
Yeah, we had a bunker down. We didn't know. I remember I looked at you and I was like, "Hey, what's the kill radius for one of those things, by the way? Like, what's danger close?" And you were like, "I don't know," because we never really heard of them until that time. Mm-hmm. And I remember I called our new lieutenant at the time, and I was like, "Hey, what's danger close?" And he was like, "Oh, you guys are good." And then it hit, and the window of the room we were in blew out, and our front wall to the courtyard of the house we were staying in fell over. Fell down. And I remember I got on the radio after, because we had dust and debris and glass all over us. You, me, and both our squads. And I was like, "Hey, 6, this is 2. You're an You could hear him on the radio just laughing.
Well, yeah, they ruined our food because our food had glass and dust and we just opened up MREs. But I mean, we used a lot of different tactics. I feel like, especially once we really cleared the city and we started the major operations like Arrowhead Ripper. I mean, that was a lot more decisive moving forward. I feel like we weren't necessarily clearing houses; it was just movement to contact.
Oh, it was straight movement to contact. That first day in Katoon, good Lord, it was 4 streets. And these weren't big streets. And it was a small neighborhood. We had 2nd Platoon to our left. Us, 1st Platoon, were in the center. Then 3rd Platoon had a small section because previously they already lost Romeo Squad. They lost an entire squad for an IED. So they took a small section of town to clear, and it was us and second platoon that had the bulk. But it was only like 4 streets and these little brick mud house kind of things. Most of them were 2-story, but it took us an entire day to move up and clear 4 streets of houses.
It was 141 degrees too, I think. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, it was so hot. Like, we would walk into a house, sit down, and drink a bottle of water.
Yeah.
I mean,
that first day was just insane clearing Gatun because we were dropping so many ordnance. Like, it was like weapons free in that place. Remember the cement J-Dam?
Yeah. Like, we ran out of Gimlers and we ran out of like real J-Dams, so they started dropping the training ones, which was essentially like a piece of concrete.
Yeah. Like
a Jersey barrier they just push out the back of a plane.
Right. I remember they told us that one of the some high-ranking general wanted to see what it would do to a deep-buried IED if it would like hit it and detonate it. So we were dropping so much stuff. They were literally like experimenting in this battle because everything was on the table. But I remember they did the first test and there was no splash, there was no boom, there was no bang, and they didn't know where it went. Remember?
Yes. Yeah.
But we found it like 2 weeks later.
We did.
Everything calmed down in Gatun, and it was like Gatun took about a week or so to clear it out. I think. There was so much stuff that happened in Gatun. Good Lord. We could talk about that for another 2 hours, just that one battle. But
no, I remember finding the lost J-Dam.
Back in the...
Because I remember you walked in, it's like, why is this hole in the ceiling? Oh, look, it goes all the way out through the roof. And you turn around the other way, and you're like, oh, I see fins. That's not good.
Yeah, that was in the marketplace on the other side of town.
Yeah.
We went to the same house we stayed in. It was a big house owned by a doctor, and it was the only house that had cable and AC, and it was very clean and nice. But we went back to that same house a few weeks later when we got to go back to the marketplace and hold that place down. Yeah, we're just like, why is there a hole in the ceiling all the way to the floor, all the way to the basement? Like, this is weird. So I remember, did you come down to the basement with us? I remember it was me, the new FO.
I did.
Yeah, the new FO and our new platoon sergeant. We all went down there. Luckily, one of the fins broke off because it hit the only patch of dirt in the basement.
Yeah.
Everything else was cement, and I think it went under the cement slab where the cars were parked. Our platoon sergeant called it up and said, hey, we found a fin, we got a hole. We think we might have a bomb of sorts in the basement of our house we're staying in. So they're like, oh, so luckily the serial numbers were still on the fin that was left on top of the ground. So the FO called it up, and we sat there for a couple of hours. We didn't leave. And I remember the company was yelling at us going, hey, you guys did leave that house, right? And we look at each other, we're like, it's the only house in the street that has AC and cable. We're like, we're not leaving.
We're not leaving.
We're not leaving. There might be a 2,000-pound bomb in the basement, but we're not. Like, that's how complacent we were. We did not give a crap that there was possibly a 2,000-pound bomb in the basement. We didn't care. We're like, yeah. Then I call up. They're like, oh yeah, it's the cement training one. We were like, okay, cool. Yeah, we're staying here tonight. But we had no plans of leaving because it was the best house in the block.
Yeah. I mean, I remember other funny stuff we found when clearing. Like, do you remember the anti-aircraft gun that was in the basement, completely assembled?
Yes.
I think that was in Gatun, right?
I believe so. It was a Gatun. You guys found that, right?
Yeah. I hear, sorry, you need to come down to the basement and see this. And I'm like, oh gosh, what's down here? And I walk in, and it's literally anti-aircraft gun. You know, like one that you like sit on, you have pedals, like you crank it to turn it. And I'm like, what in the world is this? Like, how is it in the basement? And it was the rinky-dink stairs, you know, that like I barely fit through with my armor on. You know, I'm like, I have no idea how this even got down here. We ended up blowing it in place.
But we found some. Remember the cache down in Baritz?
Yes.
Into the Palm Grove.
Was that down in Baritz where we found that?
That was the Palm Grove.
We found the guy with the grenades. That was up north.
No, yeah, you're talking about one of the last missions. Yeah. That was later on. That was north of the marketplace.
Okay. Yeah, north of the marketplace was that.
Yeah, we found that little. We found they were actually had bedding.
Oh, the cache in Baritz. I remember that.
Because on the Palm Grove, the big one. We had
kicked in the door, and there was like a rail gun just like pointed to the open door.
Yeah, this was like a tiny little shack in the middle of the woods. This wasn't even a house. It was one little structure, tiny little structure. And I remember my guys pushed off to the left, and your guys went and cleared the little shack. And I remember you guys kicked the door open. You were like, seriously? But we found
he kicked the door open, and like I took him and like went down to the ground because all I saw was a big barrel pointing towards the door, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's gonna fire.
I know, it was like rigged because we did run into that problem there, especially in Gatun. You kick a door open and the whole house would detonate. They were rigging up house beds and booby traps. That was a factor there. But I remember we pulled so many ordnance out of the ground. The Navy had Navy EOD guys with us, and they were requesting. They're requesting a JDAM, an air bomb to hit the area, and they were like, "No, we can't do that." They're like, "We had so much stuff we just pulled out of the dirt here in barrels, like it was packed in barrels."
They had, I think it was like big propane tanks that were empty that they cut open, and they had that buried in the ground, which was ordnance.
Yeah,
because HME, ammunition, I mean, everything was in it.
Yeah, we kept finding more and more stuff, and I'm looking over at our boss, and I was like, "You need to call the company over here. Like, our one platoon cannot secure this massive site. We probably needed two companies to secure that site, like, because we were
Yeah.
spread out thin, and we just pulled so much stuff out. Like, we gave all our C4 that we use for detonations, like breaching and stuff. We gave it all up. The whole company, all the squad leaders, gave up their C4 to the Navy EOD guys to blow the cache, and it still wasn't enough.
Well, I remember
They're like, this ain't
we
gonna
had
do
to
it.
go back. I think it was like over a click that we ran like that cord, just because
Yes.
there was so much. Like EOD's, like, we need to be back further. We need to be back further.
Yeah, they're like, we're gonna blow this, but we're
So
gonna...
how far is a click?
1,000 meters. So
a kilometer.
So what is it, about 3/4 a mile?
Yeah, roughly. Yeah, that was insane. But I do remember the guy you were talking about. I'm pretty sure that guy was a high level person up north. That was close to the end. He walked into our security area. You guys were on top of roof. Me and were on the ground, but we found like where they were sleeping. Like we found bedding, we found books. We found books and eyeglasses hanging in trees.
Yeah.
Like they were bedded down in this area. And we did find a small cache up in there too. But that guy didn't realize that there was...
That started when we found, like, my squad, like one of the teams, we were clearing a house, like, before we actually found the cache, and we found their security, and it was like 3 or 4 guys standing in a field, like,
That's right,
RPGs and AKs.
That's right, yeah.
And we engaged them, and we were going through clearing the area, and that's when you found the cache, and we were securing that when the dude walked in.
Yeah, I remember because was over there by himself. All I remember here is was our first squad leader. And I remember hearing him screaming, like, get down, put your hands. And I was like, what is that? And I couldn't see through the shrubs. So I sprint over there to see what he had. And he's over there by himself. And he has this guy with his hands up. The guy standing in front of a wall. And you could tell this guy was a bad dude. Like, he was clean cut, clean clothes. But he had a pistol belt on with a Glock. He had 2 hand grenades on his belt. And on his back that we didn't see, he had a really, expensive brick radio, like a Motorola. Ones ago, like Miles. And I'm just looking at this dude. When I saw the hand grenades strapped to his belt, I was like, okay, this is totally a bad guy.
Yeah, I was unsuctioning the guy from the river at that time, I think.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that. Your squad got that guy.
Yeah, it was one of the lookout guys and everything. He essentially, like, fell into the river and we had to get him out. I felt like we had a lot of good clearing missions up north. Like, once we got into a groove and it's the clear, hold, build, and everything mentality, like, there's still a lot of engagements. There's still a lot of, like, injuries and KIAs, but I felt like it at least got into a better groove. We started building intelligence at the time, and I remember one of our counterintelligence guys that was with us and everything, like, he built up intelligence for this mission, and that's when we started clearing, and we found all the torture chambers and everything that were in the Palm Groves. Remember that?
Yes. There was a German mother and son that was kidnapped. Remember, we tried to go and find them, but they were gone when we got there.
But we ended up finding, like, all of these, like, empty cages and just, like, torture devices, and we found the one, I think he was Iranian.
Oh, the old man?
Yeah.
He was from he was from Jordan.
But this is one of the first times that we actually linked, like, a foreign fighter, to actually, like, coming in and supporting ISIS. We
found out later, because it was, I think Sec Platoon ran him in. They did the paperwork on him, but they were like, yeah, we found out that guy was wanted in like 4 countries.
Yeah.
And he was originally from Jordan. He was probably, in his 70s, I think, maybe?
I don't know.
But yeah, he was older.
Yeah.
But remember that big house that we cleared initially before we got back into where the cages and top the shacks were? I mean, we got in, cleared it, but we couldn't find any weapons. We couldn't find anything right off the bat. And I remember my saw gunner was on the other side of the bed. We're in the main bedroom on the first floor. And I'm like, hey, check the closets, check the nightstand. And he's like, okay. And I'm checking the nightstand on my side. There's nothing in it. Grabs the drawer handle to the little nightstand by the bed on the other side of the room, pulls it open, and a pineapple grenade with no spoon, no pin, rolls forward. And he was just like, grenade! And I was like, before he could finish it, I was like, get the hell out of the room! And he like levitated over the bed. I don't think he like touched the bed, but that kid was like up and over the bed and out of the room. I kind of sprinted to the door, and I realized it was a dud. It didn't blow us up. And I was like, okay. Just as that happened, I ran back into the living room, and that's when the Navy EOD guys were walking in the door, and I was like, hey, perfect timing. Can I use you guys in the bedroom for a second? And they walked in, and they're like, where is it? I'm like, it's in the nightstand. And the guy walks around, looks at it, and goes, huh, how are we going to do this? Like, we can't detonate it inside the house, They figured that part out. Second time we went down to Brits, we hit this one street, and it was where the 1920 Brigade and Al-Qaeda were fighting for weeks. Remember, I don't know if we were down there, my squad, there was hand grenades everywhere. Just a large amount of dud hand grenades that they were chucking at each other between these four houses. And I remember I called some engineers down. We couldn't get EOD, but there's engineers down. And this engineer guy comes down and goes, "Where are the grenades at?" I'm like, "Well, there's 3 right there. Then you come into the courtyard, there's like 4 more. And let's go out back." I had to come out back, and there was like a slew. It was like an Easter egg hunt with dud pineapple old Russian grenades. They were just everywhere. Like, they were just chucking them at each other. But I don't think any of them went off. They were all duds. It was hilarious. And he was like, "Okay, this is too much. I don't know what to do here." There was probably like 20, 30 grenades. It was like an Easter egg hunt. It was like all over the place. It was funny.
Yeah, I may not have been with you for that one. I don't remember that.
I think we were down the street further.
Okay.
I think you guys were dealing with something else at that time. But the marketplace, we could just talk for hours just about the marketplace, talk for hours just about Chirur, just this individual neighborhoods within Baqubah. Like we talked before we started this, like I kept thinking every time I try to tell someone about Baqubah, like they never heard about it, they don't know about it, because all the media and all the attention in country was Baghdad. And when our 3rd platoon lost an entire squad to an IED, there was a reporter on their truck. And after that, we never got any more reporters. They did not come to Baqubah because they knew what was happening in Baqubah, and they were not going up there to do any reporting on it.
Yeah, it was too dangerous. I mean, and it was one of those, like, you could tell that, like, it's still, I feel like it wasn't widely distributed, even to, like, other units of how bad it was. Because I remember, like, once we were finally relieved and we were leaving Baqubah, like, I think it was 4th Brigade or 5th Brigade.
It was, 4th Brigade started.
Yeah,
from Fort Lewis.
They came and replaced us, and they came from Baghdad. And these guys were walking in the middle of the street, lollygagging, smoking and joking. We're throwing smoke and bounding across roads, and they're just looking at us like, "What are you doing?"
I remember, because I tried to explain to them, I was like, "Yes, like Trash Alley." When we're doing Right Seat Ride with them, we're walking up the street. I'm like, "You guys understand, we've been here for months. This is the first time we could drive and walk up this road. It was so heavily fortified, so IED'd. Like, they didn't understand that. Like, I've never walked in front of these houses before. I've jumped fences, I've jumped rooftops, we've moved alleyways. This is the first time I'm actually walking up the street and seeing the front of these houses." It was a little hectic, but yeah, the last couple of weeks there was just crazy. I mean, our last mission outside the wire. Remember that night mission? We ended up calling the Apaches in and hit the guys out in the woods.
Yeah, that was one where you and I actually didn't lead it, or we weren't the main effort. We were like, "We're tired. We're not doing it anymore." And, like, give it to.
And then we became the main effort.
We became the main effort.
Just because our location really, we just kind of sort of happened that way.
Punching out a glass window and almost cut his hand off.
Oh, yeah.
So he was kind of locked down there. But that's also, was that the one where, like, you rounded the corner and there's like 30 dudes with AKs just standing in the streets? None of them shot, they just ran? That
was your squad, it's all that, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's when one of your guys shot a 203 down the street, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that guy. I miss him. But no, it was one to where it was essentially like a street that ran right through the middle of this town, and it had little offshoots coming off of it.
Yep.
And his guys, like, they were 3 or 4 streets down, and they were like shooting and engaging like down one of these offshoots. Like, all of a sudden, like, we were coming up to support, and I was putting my guys on the other intersections to pull security, and turns around and starts running back towards me. He's like, "They're running your way. They're running your way." We started getting like little pop shots coming from like the palm groves right there at the end of those little offshoot streets. And it's like, okay, hey, just start shooting. You know, it's like, hey, like 2 streets down, just start shooting into the palm groves to try to like trap them in so they can't go that way. And I told I'm like, hey, take a 203 and fire it right at the end of the street into the edge of the palm groves. And bless his heart, he was like 5'2", and the 203 was a little bit big for him probably, but he picked it up and he shot it, and it went about 15 feet. However far it had to go to actually
arm itself,
engage the gauge to arm itself. And it blew up and like blew him over. He like fell into me. But at that point, I couldn't stop laughing. And I think I laughed the rest of that mission.
Yeah, because you guys were dealing with that over there. And I remember we went to the left of you down a smaller street. And I had the platoon sergeant and I had our Terp, which was us. He was adorable. We weren't taking any fire down the small little narrow street that we were on. It was all pitch dark down there. And I told my guys, I was like, hey, get into this building now. And they run over, start breaching the front gate and the door. And I'm pulling security out in the street. And I look to my right, there's a big dirt pile, just random dirt pile sitting there right by the front of the house. So I'm using that for cover. I'm just taking a knee behind it. And I look over to my left, and there's with his little pistol that he had, pulling security with no night vision. Like, it's pitch dark. It's like 2 a.m. in the morning. And he's pulling security with me. And I was like, you got me covered? He goes, yeah, Sergeant, I got you. And I could think the guy could probably see like 10 feet down the road. And I was like, you're so brave. But I was like, okay, get in the house. So we get to the house, we get to top the roof, and it's a really crappy roof. There's a little tiny wall, like a foot high, and it has holes in it. So standing straight up or even kneeling, you're still exposed pretty badly on this roof. And I know we had our new platoon sergeant, and I had my team leader, and they're talking. I walk up, and I was like, hey, I think the fire's coming from this. We're trying to like get a plan where, better or idea where you guys are at. Around that same time, I think the Apaches were starting to come on station. They flew like really fast to get to us. And as I'm talking, I look over and I see my cell gunner hiding by the door, like taking a knee, hiding behind the door. And I was like, get up to the wall and pull security with everybody else. And he goes, Sergeant, this roof is horrible. There's no cover and blah, blah, blah. And then at that split second, that's when a few rounds and tracer rounds went right between me and right by our faces. He was standing just adjacent to my left in front of me. And it literally went right past his face and right past my head. And I did like the Matrix, melt backwards onto my knees. I fell. The platoon sergeant fell, hit the dirt. And then I looked over at has that look on his face like, I told you so. It's just like, shut up, get pull security. And then we started lobbing 203 rounds into the Palm Grove. And I remember the Apaches came on station. We called them in, and I think they said they got, 13 or 14 guys?
Well, no, they saw like essentially what looked like a full squad. So
yes,
around like
that's
10,
right,
11
yes.
guys, like walking in the woods. And they were walking like offset like we would for like road marches, like 5 meters apart.
That's right, yes.
On different like sides of the road. And he's like, hey, who else do you have in the area? It's like, we don't have anybody.
Yeah, we had Bravo Company like far out to our west, I believe, and they were like, we're all in houses. We're like, we're not outside right now.
Yeah, I remember like switching back and forth between like the different channels to clear it with like battalion, because I don't know what was going on. But I think maybe the PL was down doing the clearing.
Yeah, the platoon sergeant was up front with us. PL was in the back.
Yeah,
because it was like the company last mission. We were like the guys that drew the short straw to go out and do this one little mission.
Yeah, like I remember like clearing the area, cleared it with like Bravo Company. I think scouts were in the area, cleared it with them, and they're like, yeah, there's nobody there. And got back on like the radio with the birds, and they're like, yeah, like these guys, they're not wearing body armor, but they are carrying weapons and everything else, and it looks like they're heading away from your position on this road.
Yep.
Like those are the guys that we just engaged.
Yep.
And the next thing we heard was like hellfire away.
Yep.
Like what? I'm sorry, what was that? Boom! But yeah, they essentially fired a hellfire like right into the middle level. I think we finally made it up there.
I think initially they engaged with one hellfire. I think it was a good strike. I think it hit most of them, and then they came back around and followed up with some rounds. There was a 30 Mike out of the machine gun, and then we waited, I believe, a couple hours till the sun came up, and then your squad and my squad pushed forward into the Palm Grove and started kind of just patrolling up into the little trails up in there. But I was like, we pushed a little further up, came into another open area, and that's when they called us back.
So the funny thing is, right, because like after we got back, like both of us, we instructed at the NCO Academy,
right,
and I realized like I couldn't do infantry anymore after that. Like I was done, like mentally and physically.
Yeah.
Like so, I went over to like the intelligence side, and I think it was known within at least like the ranks, of like our brigade what happened. But yeah, I don't know how much like external still. Like I know like doing research, they obviously did the documentary on it. But it looks like they came out with like a DVD that they're using for like lessons learned for like 520 now.
I saw something about that. I know the initial lessons learned they did when we got back. That's which I kind of explained to people. I'm like, our whole brigade was there 15 months, and our 1 battalion, 2-3, I think, when they came back did their lessons learned, it was like 30 minutes long. 1-2-3 infantry did their lessons learned video, and it was like maybe 40-45 minutes long. Ours was like 90 minutes long, and it just covered a small portion of Baqubah and nothing else. Like they couldn't fit it all in. They're like, okay, 90 minutes is done. It's enough. But yeah, just thinking about Baqubah, I mean, good Lord, we can just talk for days like that. Like sometimes I get confused with like what happened my first tour, second tour. Yeah, but I think that second tour in Baqubah, those 5 months in Baqubah, that really kind of just broke a lot of people. I'm not saying it like in a negative way, just kind of like when we got back, a lot of people like yourself changed MOSs, changed MOSs. I mean, we had stellar officers change MOSs. We had people change branches after we got back from that battle. Like people were just mentally and physically done. I mean, I went and taught at the NCO Academy, and my next deployment, I was a combat advisor. Like I was no longer, the infantry guy on the streets. Like but that was it. Like I never went back to do the infantry stuff ever after that again.
Yeah. I know a lot of people that were like that. Just because, I mean, if you think about it, people say, okay, well, like the really like bad part was like the first 3 months till everyone else got out there. And then after that, it wasn't as bad because the whole brigade was out there. But I mean, just going day to day. And like I said, like thinking like, is today my day? And it being a coin flip. Like that alone is enough to ruin anybody's mind for the rest of their life.
I mean, when you get to a point where you start taking rounds, but you're so exhausted and you just don't care, you just sit there like, I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm getting shot at. I just don't care anymore. That what it was. That was squad on squad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that wasn't. I mean, a lot of times we had company elements, but it was a street fight, and it was down to squad level. Squad leaders were making just crazy decisions every day to get their guys through that. Yeah, I think I was 26, 27 when we did that.
I was thinking about that too. I'm like, because I remember like when came over from scouts, we're like, oh, he's the young guy, you know, like he needs like a lot of work and everything. We were 26 years old when all this happened.
Yeah.
You know, I think he was 22. I mean, but he was the young guy and inexperienced.
Yeah. We were the senior old guys there.
Yeah. So, I mean, making life and death decisions at 26, it's rough.
I mean, yeah, I got to explain to them, like, I should understand, my first deployment, I was a sniper team leader at 24 in country with a wife and 3 kids already. And they were like, oh. And I was like, yeah, you just don't try to explain some of my stuff in my second tour, especially Baqubah, and they just look at me like, no. And I'm like, yeah, that really did happen.
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time I've really talked about a lot of this outside of PTSD counseling, at least. Like, I don't know. Like you said, like, my memory fades on it. I don't know if I'm just blocking a lot of it out. But it's one of those things, like, there's still a lot of vivid memories that are always there that I always think about. But then at the same time, there's some stuff, like I say, it just, like, it stops. Like, I don't know anything after this, between this period and this period. Like, nothing at all. I can't remember anything.
I have moments like that myself. But I do remember at the end, it was a little funny sidebar I just remembered. At the end of that deployment, everybody kind of realized that was the IED magnet, because he was on the PL's truck. He was on the PL's truck the first day, and his first tour in Charlie Company, he was in Telefar. He got blown up a lot. And then our second tour with us, he got, like, every striker we lost was on it.
Yeah.
Like, he was an IED magnet. You were slit trenches, like trenches full of poop. Every time we led, the platoon got covered in poop. And you were the house bed guy. Remember the house bed that you walked into and ran back out, and then 20 minutes later blew up?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was the cache guy. I found the cache in Missoula. I kept finding caches everywhere. So my squad was like the safe one to be around. We just found caches. You guys found bombs and stuff.
I'd rather find caches.
Yeah, caches were much nicer. But yeah, especially when they weren't booby trapped or anything weird. Everybody in my squad came home. Everybody in your squad, John, came home. I think you had any wounded? Can't remember.
Yeah, we had wounded.
Yeah, I mean, we had small stuff here and there. Coming home was a big reward, but that whole experience, just those friggin' 5 months and 9 days, which is crazy. When I actually had to look it up, I didn't realize it was that only 5 months. I thought it was much longer because it felt like it. But just that period and that whole experience there, like, easily, changed us forever.
Yeah.
So what is your...
But as far as the Army is concerned, like, did you guys have gains as far as that mission?
Oh, I believe that battle was a huge turning point in the war in Iraq.
It was.
That's when the tide turned.
Really, like, turned.
Yes.
But I mean, there's pluses and minuses out of it, right? Like, yeah, it kind of turned like the tide in Iraq, but it essentially developed other insurgent groups. I mean, just based off of like ideology and everything, and then essentially like it pushed from Iraq into Syria.
Yeah, 2 years down the road after we were gone. But yeah, when we cleared Baqubah, that was a huge success story, and it was just that they modeled our tactics and our way we did it to kind of help, going back to that clear whole build, to do the rest of the country that way. But yeah, we sort of crushed the Islamic State capital stronghold in Iraq was Baqubah at that time. We stomped it.
So you did successfully take over their capital.
Yes, and I do remember I was at the beginning of 2008, I think, because we got out of there, it was like August, September 2007, but it was only a few months down the road when Intel was hearing that Al-Qaeda was literally telling fighters to stop coming to Iraq. Like, they literally put the word out that the Americans are too much, don't even bother coming here anymore. So it was shortly after us, stomping them a new one in Baqubah where we came across that message, the Intel community did.
I think I agree. I mean, it's one of those like turning point in Iraq and the different battles. I feel like Iraq probably wasn't as bad after that, although I wasn't there. So it's hard for me to say. Just like watching the news and what I know from the intelligence side, I feel like it got a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those that I feel like what we did, like we created like some new tactics, definitely like new tactics around like urban combat and how to actually like like manipulate and like work in an urban environment when you are not necessarily completely light infantry. So as strikers, so we developed a lot of like new SOPs and everything for that.
When was it a second platoon got their striker blown up, and I got pinned down in a striker for over an hour. That was fun.
Yeah,
that's the same day we lost a commander. The commander's truck got hit in the old marketplace.
Yeah, there's still a lot of things that can be talked about. Like that was a pretty like decisive day.
Yes.
There's still like third platoon, their incident, but
yes.
even like with like, I mean, we could talk about that as well.
Exactly.
I mean, there's good things that happen and bad things that happen. I feel like there's a lot of things that happened early at Baqubah that impacted operations the rest of the time we were there. Our battalion and battalion commander was like tired of people getting hurt. You know, I mean, every day go out and like someone would get killed. You know, 5 people get injured. We lose a striker. You know, turn into the Wild West, and that's essentially what it was.
Exactly. You're right.
Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you coming on. I know this was probably a little bit hard for you guys, so I'm sorry if that impacted you.
I'll live.
I appreciate it. Good for my son.
Okay. Well, you guys have a good day.
Absolutely. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks for all the fun memories.
Absolutely.
We will always share those.
Huh?
I said, let me know when you want to do it again.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, take care.
All right.
All right.
Have a good one.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Bye.